Welcome to One Word Stories. My name is Jana Zell. I'm really happy to welcome Arti Kashikar. Welcome, Arti.
Thanks, Joanna. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining me because I cannot wait to talk about women leadership, particularly in different Asian countries. And you bring an extensive knowledge about it and also experience. So, Arti is an executive coach working both with men and women in many Asian countries. And she's originally from India, has lived in Singapore and the Philippines. Nevertheless, she has worked also with clients from plenty of Asian countries and focused especially on six of them in her newest book, How Women Work. So in this book, she pays an homage to women who are in leadership positions in various Asian countries. Nevertheless, obviously, she also works with male leaders. And in her book, she focused on not only interviews, conversations with female leaders, with women leaders, but also with men counterparts. From China, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, India, the Philippines. So, Arti, I cannot wait to hear more. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Because, when I read your book and when I also followed the pieces of information you have scattered in different platforms, I said to myself, wow, before we dive into this realm of women's work and world and work in Asian context, I would be very interested what stories actually do women in leadership positions keep telling themselves no matter what geographical altitude. So what universal stories do you think exist, no matter if in Asia, both Americas, Africa, Australia, Europe?
Yeah, you're right, Joanna. So I think there are some messages or some stories, as you put it, that are universal. I mean, they're across cultures, industries, levels of leadership or roles. Yeah. And I think they show up in different ways, but the themes are very common. I will share three that I think are pretty relevant and pretty common to see. I think one is, women asking themselves, "Am I ready? Am I ready for this role?" And this is a big one because surprisingly, women often experience a gap between capability and self-belief. And you see that across. Will I be able to do this? Will I be able to take up an assignment? Will I do justice to a stretch role? So I think these are some things that are common. And one of the reasons is because of the fact that, we think we're not good enough, perhaps, or we've grown up with that belief. We've also heard about, things like imposter syndrome, right? Where you question your capabilities or your abilities. And then related to that is the fact that research also tells us that typically men raise their hands for a promotion or a role if they're 50% ready, whereas women will raise their hands at 80% or 90% readiness levels. Yeah. So I think this is one common message. Another one is about I need to prove myself,
Mhm.
again. Yeah. So I think that is about how women, even at senior leadership positions, they feel that they must continuously demonstrate their competence, you know. So they put pressure on themselves that, okay, I have to do well. I have to be seen to do well. I have to prepare really well. They want to be perfect, and they don't always delegate. And another interesting thing that I find here is that they may take mistakes personally and they think that it reflects their personal inadequacy. So I feel again, this is more common with women than with men. And the third one that I think is also fairly relevant or big is the story that as women, we have to navigate cultural expectations carefully. I think regardless of location, women are particular about cultural norms, which is a great thing. They're particular, they're sensitive to how they may be perceived, gender norms, age, seniority, family role, community expectations. They may sometimes ask, how will this be perceived? Is my ambition acceptable here? Do I belong in this room? Yeah. And I find this particularly true in Asia, where, in some places the what is important, but I think in large places in Asia, the how is important. How you speak up, how you influence, how you dress, even.
Mm.
So because of the cultural nuances, because of the patriarchy, because of the hierarchy, all of this really comes together.
Yeah.
So I think these are three broad messages that or stories that women tend to tell themselves.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, because this is exactly the issue that it happened to, I guess, maybe most of us, that we also came up with different ideas in different contexts, and a couple of minutes later we hear a male colleague saying this same idea in a louder voice, reframed a little bit, and kind of, selling it as his own, right? So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's not about all men. It's not the point. It's just that this is this experience I hear many, many times that we share as women, and it was really hilarious just recently because one woman shared it as well, and she said, "And you know what I'm doing in such a moment? I'm simply saying, oh wow, I'm so happy you have mentioned my decision in your comment and your proposal. Yes, exactly. This is what I meant."
correct, correct.
Yeah,
Mansplaining, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, you have just said that it's so important also to speak up, to not only take a place at the table, but also to make this place your own, so to say. So, own it, yeah. And I'm really curious to hear if there are any differences regarding these courageous actions in different Asian countries. What have you noticed? And also describe in your book, by the way, this is the book.
That's right. Yeah. As you know, I mean, this book, covered women and men across six Asian countries. So I looked at we were based in Singapore at the time when I wrote the book. So it features women in Singapore, China, Japan, Philippines, Thailand, and India. So one is in terms of differences. One is to look at the big picture in terms of women's participation or progressiveness, right, in society. So you find that that is across a spectrum. You have countries like Thailand and the Philippines, which are more progressive, and you have many women in the workforce in these countries. You have Singapore and China, where also there are women. It's more of a practical perspective to have women at the workforce. In China, famously, Mao had said that women hold up half the sky. But that was really to get more women into the workforce after the Cultural Revolution. There's still, it's a long way to go before there is a level playing field. And then you have countries like India and Japan where it is more patriarchal. And Japan, in fact, is a very different picture and a bit of a surprise actually when I was doing the research. It takes, I think, the last spot amongst the G7 developed countries and economies in terms of women participation and emancipation. So firstly, you have that big picture, yeah, the differences. Then I can talk about differences in other aspects. For example, if you look at leadership styles, now all of these are Asian countries, and they have cultural nuances, different types of cultural nuances in terms of hierarchy, harmony, relationship oriented, all of those. But they seem to have certain preferences for leadership styles in each of these countries, at least based on the research that I did. For example, in Singapore, it is a very practical, result-driven, efficient way of working, right? And that's Singapore for you. I mean, it's very efficient. It works, right? And the women also work in that fashion. In contrast, you have Philippines, which is more relaxed, which is very, all about relationships. They have a word called malasakit, which is about empathy. So, so leaders there have to balance empathy with accountability. So it sounds easy, but it isn't. Then you have Thailand, where it's all about leading with head, heart, and humility. In China, being visionary seems to be very important. When I asked people, like, what is a leadership style or quality, almost all of them said it's very important to be a visionary and to be goal driven. In Japan, it's about hierarchy, it's about reading the subtle cues, it's about not disrupting the harmony. And in India, it's about balancing, I think, ambition or drive with relationships, and it's also about dealing with ambiguity. And so I think, these are the broad leadership preferences. And one thing I realized is that culture, whether it's organization culture or national culture, it really plays a part. It can be an enabler for success, it can be a disruptor for success. So if the national culture is more progressive, I think women tend to do better. Yeah, because they can do better in environments which are less hierarchical and more collaborative. So that's, one piece again about the leadership styles and the preferences. The other piece is about differences in communication, differences in how we influence at work. You have in East Asia, it's more of, people are more indirect, and women tend to lead through precision, through quiet authority, through consistency. Whereas you have in South Asia, it's more expressive, more articulate. People are more relationship driven. It's more through persuasion. So you have a little bit of that difference, in terms of communication. I remember when I was in Singapore, people would often say that, how is it that Indians speak, English reasonably well, are articulate, and also have a lot of energy, And until then, I never really thought of it, because I just thought that's how we speak. Of course, that's not for everybody, right? But I think for some people who are especially, out there in some of these countries, right? The other thing that is also different is in terms of access to networks.
Mhm.
You find that in Japan, in Korea, sometimes these networks tend to be more male oriented. They tend to involve, socializing over drinks. And sometimes women aren't able to participate in them, because it's after work hours, and other constraints that they may have. You have in some of the other Asian markets, there are networks for women professionals and quite easy to access. Um, so yeah, so I think these are some broad differences, across these countries, that I experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because when I listen to you, I'm just asking myself what might be different from the leadership, let's say, perception in the so-called Western countries. I mean, with the Western, I mean the United States, Canada, Western Europe, in comparison with Asian countries. How do you see it?
Yeah, so I haven't really studied or researched, the West versus Asia. So it may not be a very precise, explanation that I have, but just basis, what I have seen, experienced, read. I do think that there's some differences, and largely it's really about because of the cultural nuances. You have countries which are very hierarchical, countries that are fairly patriarchal, which then governs or which impacts how women are then perceived. So, like one example is in terms of ambition, so you have in some countries, for example, like Thailand and Philippines, it's quite socially accepted for women to be, running the house. And there are lots of women that you see. Whereas in Japan and Korea, it's more of a collective society. So individual achievement has to be framed in a certain way, in terms of like for the greater good or in terms of service to the group. So one has to be cognizant of that, which I think is not always the case in the West. You have also in countries like India and China and other countries which are more patriarchal. On one level, ambition is a good thing, but how you show your ambition is important, because if you're very brazen, it can be seen as being too pushy or not being politically correct. So in these aspects, it's a little different from the West, where it's okay to be ambitious, right? But here you have to be ambitious. It's almost like within a particular framework. It's okay to do this in this particular way. And as I mentioned earlier, I think if the what is important in the West, the how is important in Asia. And I think that's really a big difference. You might be doing the same job, you might be doing the same work, but the way you go about doing some of these things, keeping in mind some of the broader cultural nuances and societal preferences, I think that is really the difference. The challenges are similar. We've talked about it. The stories are also sometimes similar, but I think they get a little more accentuated in this part of the world because of some of these external aspects. So it's almost like women have to work and lead like everybody else, but there is, if you can envisage, so there's one leadership layer and then there is another invisible cultural layer,
Mhm.
and you have to kind of navigate both to be able to go up the ladder and to be able to succeed. And in some places it's like, oh, don't drop the boat, don't speak too loudly, you don't want to be sticking out like a sore thumb, you don't want to make too much noise. So, as this lady in Japan told me, she said that uh, in some places, a woman has to make an omelet without breaking eggs, and so
It's
it's,
important.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and while that's a bit of an exaggeration, it doesn't apply across the board, but you get the point, right? So it is a little bit of, it's complex, because you have to navigate both aspects, in order to be able to fit in and then stand out, you know?
exactly.
So, yes, yes.
Exactly. However, this fitting in, when I hear you right now speaking about it, I immediately picture many situations when women adapt or even over adapt. Do you have such an experience?
Okay, so I'll share a story from the book, which is very close to my heart and which I really like. So this is the story of this Thai lady called Sansani. She was working with Unilever, and she was a director with them, and she's based in London, in their London office. This is, of course, many years ago. And she narrates this anecdote when so she is this Asian woman leader in the UK, and she says that I was in one of Unilever's meetings in London, and all these top global managers from across the world had come, and basically they were there to discuss how to increase sales of hair care products, their shampoos and all of that. And she said that as I looked around, seated at this big table, conference table, were older white men with little or no hair talking about innovation for Asian women's hair, And she said that it struck me that as the only Asian woman in the room, I was the only person who had some real understanding of the hair issues that we were discussing. And she says that the senior management at Unilever at that time was a big boys' club. And she said, initially, I worked on getting accepted. But after a while, I realized that I would never actually fit in to the boys' club. And my learning over time was that it was less about fitting in with them and more about feeling comfortable and confident in my own skin
Yeah.
you know and I just love this anecdote because it was about taking charge. It was so empowering, and it really resonated, and I think eventually fitting in and standing out kind of became the subtitle of my book, because this was the experience of many women. So to your point in terms of how do we fit in, I think another example is about credibility, and that's probably again a difference between the West and Asia. I'm not sure, but uh, perhaps that could be a difference. For example, on one level, leadership is gender agnostic, but women are often perceived differently in terms of their credibility, in terms of their performance, in terms of their communication. So I'll give you an example again where this Taiwanese leader, she was working in an organization in Asia, and she was posted, I think she was working in Scandinavia, and then she was posted to Indonesia. And she was heading a large team. She was working in human resources. And she said that, when she initially joined the team, she wasn't seen as being senior enough or having gravitas because, she was um, uh, petite, and her personality didn't really convey her seniority in terms of age or experience. And she says that she had to work really hard at, creating a good impression, at being seen as knowing her stuff. She would prepare more for meetings. She would try to make good points so that people felt, oh, okay, she knows her stuff. So that's one example out of so many that I have really, and I've discussed that in the book as well, in terms of how women are seen in a new role, in a new team, in a new context, you know. And so again, these are very subtle things. We don't really talk about it so much, but I do think it's commonly experienced in Asia. And 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 then how do they then fit in? And then after fitting in, so after they've kind of settled into a role, and then they kind of go on to creating impact and then shining and then standing out, you know. But how do they really uh, establish credibility? I mean, they do this in different ways. For example, I think, like in this example, like, I mean, they work really hard, they prepare well, they they work consciously on developing their expertise. And I think oftentimes they ask themselves that, okay, how can I add value to my work and how can I be a valuable team player? Because much of Asia works like that. So I think these are some of the ways in which they establish their credibility. And I think you always have to walk a line between not overdoing it on the other side, right? And that was your question, right? In terms of adapting and over adapting. So there is this great example of how, women, when they speak, they have to be careful in some of these cultural contexts. For example, a Thai leader, a Thai manager, she told me how she learned to speak up in meetings. Whereas a Japanese banker was told that she should be succinct and on point in meetings. So she actually learned how to do that. So it's amazing, in terms of just communication and how they've learned how to adapt and kind of almost, tread this balance, right? Not going one way or the other, which is, pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing skill set. And many of them have learned how to be cool and calm, develop a thick skin, not react, not raise their voice, not show anger or drama, or else they'll be labeled.
Yeah, you have interviewed so many leaders, both male and female. And actually, I would be really curious, what was the one story, one example really standing out for you? Nomen omen, showing what is the best strategy to stand out? Because we have talked so much about adaptation and also fitting in. However, what was the moment that was really surprising for you when you heard what actually happened to the person that she stood out?
Yeah. So I think there were lots of great success stories, lots of strategies. Um, so I think a few that stood out was that, one of these male leaders, when I asked him about the women in his team, and he said that, women are often not strategic, and they don't go beyond and they don't think big. And so I kind of took that and I went back to the women, and I said, what do you think about this? And many of them agreed, and they said, yeah, that's true, because as women we tend to be in the here and the now. Oftentimes women say, okay, we are in the good zone, it's okay not to be in the great zone. And I think that's again another story that we tell ourselves. And so they don't really think ahead. And so I think a lot of times, what women would consciously do was to say, okay, where am I going to be 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, to kind of conceptualize and then plan for it, right? Learn, unlearn, and stay relevant. So I think that was one big, strategy that people shared. A lot of the women took risks and they went out of their comfort zone. So again, that was interesting because I remember when I was talking to women in Thailand, um, uh, many of them don't like to leave the country, and go outside the country to work. And whereas you find in other places, women are happy to go out, and that helps, right? That helps them kind of grow in their careers. So, so taking risks and having the courage to fail, I think was a big example of kind of shining and, growing in your career. The other piece was about networking, networking strategically, finding allies, finding mentors, going out of your way, being proactive about it. And there was this amazing story of this Japanese lady, Kumi Ito, who talked about how she would, connect with influencers in the organization consciously and how that would help her, execute some of the decisions. So that was, again, very interesting. And I think over and above, I think it's really about being visible and vocal. It's about how can you showcase your achievements, but how can you do it in a way that is palatable, that is authentic,
Yeah.
in the Asian context, right? Because again, the how is important. So you don't want to go the other extreme. You don't want to be seen as being over the top or being, showing off, etc., but doing it in a way that it will be perceived in the way you want it to be perceived. And I think what was interesting was that many of them talked about, building an authentic personal brand, which is something I think all of us need to do. Uh, you know, just be clear about what we stand for, who are we, what are our strengths, and what do we want to be known for. And of course, these days, LinkedIn and social media, all of that helps, right? So, yeah, so I think some of these aspects are important to kind of, to go the distance and it sets you apart from the others in terms of just working on these things consciously over time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, based on all these interviews you have conducted and also conversations you have had, what would be such a, I don't know, strategy, first step? Maybe let's start with baby steps, with tiny steps, to break the glass ceiling.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a big one. So, honestly, I think the glass ceiling exists. I uh, don't think things are going to change, anytime soon. But I think the landscape is changing now, with the younger generations. They're certainly more driven, more tenacious, more vocal. They're less accepting of biases, which is a good thing. So I think they definitely are in a better place to make things happen. I think many of them want to write their own script. They don't settle for mediocrity. I see a lot of younger people, in startups and in their own businesses and entrepreneurs. And then, of course, frankly, the sky is the limit, right? If it's your own business. I think the issue is what happens if you're in a corporate structure, right? Because then there is a glass ceiling. Um, I think we have to watch and see, wait and see, because they're still young, Gen Z, and they still have years to go ahead. Um, so I think it's a bit early to say that will they break the ceiling or not. You have to go out of your comfort zone. You have to be able to speak. You have to be able to enlist allies. You have to be proactive. You can't just sit and say, oh, this is not working. So I think that is a big learning. And also, when I saw some of these women across countries, I felt that a lot of the women, they were enabled by having more of a solution mindset.
Mhm.
So they didn't focus so much on the problem. They didn't say, oh, I am the victim, oh, how am I going to do this? They were like, okay, let's just do it. Let's just go move forward. Let's not think about the issues and the challenges, and we just take it on the go. I know that's easier said than done, but these women did that. And I think that's a very important learning, especially as women, because oftentimes we feel that, oh, this whole gender thing, we keep thinking about and talking about it, and it kind of overwhelms you. And I think at some point you have to say, you know what, if I have to make it, I have to be treated like everybody else, which means that I have to work on the same level. And I have to just make things happen. So I think wherever possible, I think that's a great mindset to have.
Mhm. And this is also something what I have definitely taken from your book as a fantastic observation, that in many, many cases when women talked about their leadership positions, that this fitting in and standing out, that it's neither nor, so or either or, but that it's also both. That this is the strategy behind, yeah. That in
Yeah.
every single situation, in every single day, it's a conscious decision. How do I want to behave in this particular moment so that I'm effective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on. And, that's the interesting thing about my observations about how these women in Asia lead, which is perhaps different from women elsewhere, which is that because of I mean, this is my hypothesis that because of all of these cultural nuances and societal expectations, etc., and they want to make it work without offending people and things like that. I think they are able to straddle almost contrary nuances. So they could be very assertive at the same time. They could be polite. They could be humble and showing their vulnerability. At the same time, suddenly they will push back and communicate a tough decision. Like this one lady in the Philippines told me that, we know when to be in the balcony and when to be on the dance floor, you know. Then this other lady in Singapore told me that, one of the things that work for her is that she's able to zoom in when needed and zoom out when needed. And again, that's very important because for success, a lot of women are tend to be very good at the details, very good at the operations. But then if you want to grow in the organization, you also have to zoom out and be strategic and think of the bigger picture, right? So the ability to be able to say, okay, in this situation, I'm going to do this.
Yeah,
And in another situation on the same day, wear a completely different hat. So to be able to juggle these different mindsets and skill sets is not easy. And I think that is really unique to how Asian women lead.
yeah, yeah. Of course, not every day sun is shining. Yeah, it costs us
Yeah.
lots of energy to make these conscious decisions, and sometimes there are also turbulent situations. And this is actually something I would like to ask you as the very, very last question. This is the question I ask all my One Word Stories guests. In such a turbulent situation, when you recall something in the maybe also leadership context, what was the one word that was helpful in your case, and what is the story behind?
I think the word would be reach. Because as I was talking to these women who are reaching for the stars, reaching for their dreams, right? And I'm trying to unpack that. Um, I also realized that I was reaching beyond myself, and sometimes, even I had to look inside because it was a difficult time. I started writing How Women Work the month before COVID struck.
Oh yeah.
So it was, yeah, so it was, a crazy, chaotic time the world over. I had some personal setbacks as well. My dad passed away at that time, and it was crazy in terms of just logistically managing. I was based in Singapore, etc. So there were times when I really felt that writing that book really tested my resilience, my patience. And I had to really tap into my conviction, into my passion, into going ahead into, just continuing and finishing the book because that was something I really believed in,
Yeah,
So I think it was really about reaching for me as well.
I love it. I love it. When you believe in something, don't hesitate to reach for it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Right.
And it was also interesting because I was so inspired by all these different people. And then I had to also up my game,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Thank you. Thank you, Artie, very, very much. It was a real pleasure to read your book. I will put the link to your book also in the comment. And I can warmly encourage everybody to reach out also to you and to, of course, this publication if you want to know something more about how actually women work in Asia. Thank you very much.
thank you so much, Joanna. Complete pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.